Yeah, this is offline mode, the presentation. Hope you guys are excited about it. I'm a product engineer at Bezlio. I've been a developer for 3 years now, with 6 months of them being at...
6 of the 3 years.
6 of my 3 years have been at this great company. So I've been at Bezlio since May. Again, I'm a product engineer here, so I work on the app and I help you see all the cool things that, create all the cool things that the app does. So in offline mode, the first question is, why do you need an offline mode? And I think that the situation that we've had here at Bounce is a pretty good example of why you would need an offline mode, since the Wi-Fi has been down here and we've had to use hotspots. If this was like a warehouse or something, you wouldn't have that option to use a hotspot, or you wouldn't have a reliable connection. So after seeing that and having requests from customers for the ability to use offline mode, we decided that we were going to go and build it. So then you have to ask yourself the question of, what does an offline mode fully consist of? So the simplest thing is just to run seamlessly. When you start the app, you really expect it to work basically as well as it does online. And so that means we should be able to switch between different accounts. We should be able to have your list of bezels load even if you're offline. You should be able to reconnect to the app seamlessly as soon as you get that connection back. And you should be able to work across accounts again. So there were, of course, some challenges into getting offline mode running. And the biggest challenge that we came into was the fact that Bezlio is a super open platform. You can have anything from these, as soon as it loads. Give it a second. With my hotspot, the internet goes real slow. You can have anything from these table selectors that just list the data out there, or we can have something as cool as the Cedar Point bezel that we made for when we had our company trip to Cedar Point, and we used it to kind of tell everyone where we are and what we were doing. So we have to kind of be able to support everything that the Bezlio platform can do and run it seamlessly offline, which kind of goes against the traditional way that you would do an offline mode, where you would store the state of the app completely and just rerun it from that state that you've saved. So to kind of get around that, we had to re-look at how we decided to do saving. And we decided to save the whole states of the app at the points that you went offline. So if we go back over here, I don't need to sit on my keyboard, and we take a look at that Cedar Point bezel, we see that a lot of the data comes from this. It looks like it is not mirroring my displays. Maybe if I end the show? Okay, there we go. So, I think this one will actually be a little bit easier to see. So if we look at this data sub and we compare to the table selector that we have over here, we see that they both are pulling customer data. So what really needs to be saved to get this working offline is the data that this data subscription is pulling back from your, in this case, Salesforce database. So we decided that that was the point that we were going to look at to try and run the offline mode. So we can show an example of that happening. Another thing we needed to do as well for offline mode to work as seamlessly as it does is you have to actually enter into the data, because each bezel is kind of like its own mini app. So when you're going into accounts, it's something that you're pulling online, and you're pulling down the HTML and the code that's running with it. So you have to enter the app before you can actually run it offline, and we needed a way to show you guys that that was the case. So right now there's 2 of them because of a glitch that happened when the latest iOS got released, and we're looking into that right now. But this right here means that you've loaded into the app and you've loaded everything necessary to use the app offline. So right now we're in airplane mode, and everything loaded up seamlessly. We can change pages, we can filter. So if we can play from current slide. So that was how we changed how we were going at the offline approach. And then we come up on another challenge, which was a really big piece of the offline mode in general. And that is occasionally you'll come upon, more than occasionally, you'll come upon circumstances where you actually need to save something that is being updated. So I'm not sure if it's actually going to show up if you look under Stephen Strange, because that's my name, at Bezlio. We're having connection troubles, which is why it might not update online right now. But we needed the ability to update, so we're actually writing to the database. So we needed to store not just read-only, but write-back data. So as my example was the chat system that came from our Cedar Point bezel. So our solution to that was create a queue workflow. So, oh, that's why it wasn't updating. I'm offline. Which shows us, oh wow. So we actually do need to run this online first. The updates portion of it. Let's read. And then load into the Cedar Point bezel. And then we're going to try it one more time. And then give it a second to see if it's actually going to load. Make sure I'm online this time. Again, this is happening because of the issues with the Wi-Fi here right now, and this very slow connection that's going on. All right, so if we run that, and then we should be able to go to our write-back queue page, and we can see the name of the bezel and the data subscription that is doing the write-back. So we can compare that to, if we go here, this is our Cedar Point bezel. It's telling you that this is what it's running, and I'm offline on my computer as well since I'm running airplane mode. So we're getting some errors because it's trying to pull down all of the information that we have stored on our data subscriptions. So if I restart the app and then give it a second, it will update and tell you that it's actually connected when it's ready. So if we go to home, and then queue, and refresh. There we go. And now it's updated to test despite the slight technical difficulties we've been having with the funkiness that's been happening. So that was kind of the idea, was to create this queue where as you are offline and trying to do all your updates, so we can just put in a bunch of random letters, and then we can go back over to our queue, and we can see that it's actually listing each item that we've input into the write-back. And we also have the ability to swipe to delete. Occasionally. And this just allows us so that we can have the ability, so before we would automatically just run everything without throwing it through our own system and having our own SQL database that will store the timestamps and kind of smartly react to what it is you're doing. And this write back was really what started us down the path of creating the queue. And then the third challenge that came to this was with a lot of things that we can do with the power of Ionic and the native framework is we can pull from the plugin ecosystem that existed out there. The problem that we ran into with trying to store the data like we do, because we do encrypt everything that we store offline so that a user couldn't go into their file system and see all the things that are written to the database. We run it through an AES encryption and then an HMAC. So we tried to use something out there called secure storage, which sounds exactly like what you would need to run this. However, it was made for more short-term data that was considered more volatile. So we kind of had to go out there and build our own encryption service that can safely encrypt and store long-term data into a SQL database. Any questions?
Can you, I was thinking about the security, the remote data broker. Can you explain how that works?
What do you mean? Can you try to elaborate?
So remote data broker, you install it inside your private network. It's not publicly accessible via the internet. We actually kind of have a bit of a clever way that it operates that you install it inside your network and use a single service bus basically to receive messages from the Bezlio cloud saying, hey, how do we like this list of customers or something like that. So it's kind of a two-key system. Within your Bezlio account, you'll have your users have tokens, IDs and tokens associated with them. You install the same IDs and tokens inside Bezlio Remote Data Broker, and that says, okay, this person is allowed in. I'll entertain hearing the answers to their questions. But then from there, you can actually further refine down what they're allowed to see based off of those IDs and tokens. So,
it's encrypted AES 256, and we use a 15-character randomly assigned encryption token, so you don't have to worry about like weak passwords or anything like that as well. We're actually establishing those for you. So from server directly to device, it's encrypted, even up until the point that it reads it from the cache, if you're using cache data. We actually hijack the exact same system, and what we're doing to do the caching is we're just going to pull out the responses as we're getting them, and if you mark it that you want it cacheable, we're saving that in your own storage mechanisms.
So the data broker on a private network that is responsible for creating the tokens?
We actually create the tokens for you. So basically what happens is the user goes into like this area, or the administrator does in this case, where you create a channel for that user that gives them that ID and the token, and then the server administrator is going to take that token and they're going to plug it in on the server side as well. So the nice thing about that in terms of IT security is that the cloud is never updating your config, you update your config. That way it keeps you entirely secure in that way. The administration console is not even accessible to the internet, so you can really make sure that you're maintaining that security.
Okay. We're talking about the sub-30 VPNs involved?
Nope.
we're almost like a single-use, one-time on VPN per transaction, as opposed to it being a VPN where you kind of get in, you can see the whole house, you're allowed to just do the one thing. So, and that way, it's a little bit better than a VPN.
And knows exactly what to expect.
That's right. Yeah. So sales rep pay everyone to, you're not allowed to see accounting data, or you're not allowed to browse the whole network or something like that, unless it doesn't have data.
Right on. And is the communication maintained like from device to network, or is there like how much of the form data information or anything like that is how much of it is actually outside of the data broker, outside of the private network?
So we leverage, when we talk about the Bezlio cloud, it's actually a bunch of Azure services that we're utilizing for that. So when you might say, like, give me a list of customers, what's actually happening is your Bezlio session, whether it's a mobile app or a web app, is putting that out to our API, essentially, which is the which is also kind of writing a message into this queue, this service bus queue, which is like just instantly delivered down to that server that's listing point that doesn't have a data broker. So the request goes through Azure. Technically, it's not a direct peer-to-peer with your private network, but you know the brief moment that we're leveraging it is milliseconds.
Somebody asked yesterday about like collisions. How does Bezlio handle that at all immediately, or do we have to figure that out ourselves? Like I pull down the data at 12, I go offline, I make some change to it, I come back online at 1, but at 12:30 somebody else made a change to the data live.
So currently, we would expect that something on your server would be checking timestamps. However, we have been talking about ways to implement that. That would probably have to be done through BRDB rather than on the client side. So that's where the discussion's been talking.
Yeah, and that's one of the parts of, what people get is that, like, when you think about writing apps for offline mode, you kind of have to think about them a little bit differently, because you have to have that in mind that you could potentially be writing a transaction against data that doesn't exist anymore, depending on the timing of it and things like that. So, the use of temporary tables and the use of more intelligent stored procedures or something like that may be beneficial to do. We largely just give you the building blocks and try to give you good guidance on how to do it, but the rest of it is pretty, you kind of have to figure out.
If you think about the same thing that happened to online, that was
Yeah.
you want to open for a second, it needs to say it first in the same situation, so you can intelligence, like you said, staged somehow.
Yeah.
So do you check that box for offline, and if you don't, it doesn't, that data subscription isn't?
Yeah, on this side, so we have a couple of options over here. Apologies for forgetting about going over this. We have the type of subscription, so it can say whether it's a write-back or a read-only, which is where that distinction comes in, on whether or not it decides to use that queue. And then we have our offline-enabled checkbox, and this allows you to differentiate between data subs that you want to only work if you have a connection and those that you do need to work offline. So if you were to remove this, then it would no longer try to save it offline or try to write to a queue.
What's the on-demand one?
On demand, so typically when you run a data sub, as soon as it's is added, it runs. On demand says, I don't want to run the data sub as soon as it's added. I want to wait and run it when I say run.
You think about, like, when Bob did his notification earlier, like, when the Bezlio launches, it said push notification, so you can mark it as on demand, and then it will only call whatever you call process on it.
It's like the line, it's on the snippet, it's like the Bezlio.dataservice.process, and you put in parentheses the name of the data stuff, and it says like, go for it. And if you have variables like baked in there, it would evaluate them at that time as opposed to at the time of Bezlio.
Any other questions?
Do you use connection strings to get to those?
So the plugins themselves can abstract out a little bit. So like the SQL Server, for example, it actually has two sections to it. One is like the list of the folders where the queries are stored at, that you're kind of like publishing. And the second is the list of the connections that are available. So it's almost like a connection string format. It's more like a multi-line kind of like what's the server name, what's the database name, what's the email password.
Is that also encrypted on the device?
It's actually not even published to the device at all. It actually lives inside your network in BRDB. So we actually don't expose that. If you see here, like where the connection there says Bezlio, that's actually pointing to a SQL Server, database that we've got set up out there. It's custom table and that kind of stuff.
But at no point is the connection string floating around in plain text?
No, yep. And what's cool about that too is like you might change your passwords, and all you gotta do is go change the config file in BRDB for okay, I have to do this server connection, give a new password. The users of Bezlio will never need to know or care that change, so long as you maintain it there. We're kind of more we go through that whole service bus, token key sort of process. We kind of shield them from that intricacy.
Okay, so all that's just stored on the server.
So the SQL injection side of things, you should be mindful of that right now. The way that if you look at the source for the SQL plugin that's out there, it is a pretty basic, like execute query that kind of came into it. So what we would recommend is, when you're setting up that SQL Server plugin, or any of your plugins really, is consider what the bare minimum amount of permissions you actually need to, for this thing to do what you want it to do.
And you'll configure that in, say, like, in your SQL Server.
Yeah.
The one thing that is interesting, though, is that in terms of SQL injection, like, we've minimized the risk in a large way because the queries themselves live on the server. So the only time that you can have potential injection problems would if people were like overriding parameter values somehow, which would be pretty advanced case kind of stuff. Because other than that, you see how it says query name is get Cedar Point. So that's actually a .SQL query file that lives on the server that you've published to the user. And you said this user's allowed to access this query.
So it's like a prepared state.
Yes. Yeah. There's no dynamic SQL execution at all supported through there because what we're trying to do is, as much as we can, is give a lot of control to the administrator, in terms of who can access what data and how they can access it and all that other kind of stuff. And then from there, it's like you're just publishing those resources to a user. They don't have access to what those resources actually are.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if, devices are floating around, pages in the wrong hands, like, what's the worst they can do and how I can, mitigate that.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it is that if a user loses a device or something like that, and once token expiration hits, they won't be able to get into Bezlio anyways. But B, before that point in time, you can just turn off that person's connection, and they won't be able to access it. So on the server, you say, I'll accept a request from this person. If they log in and you've disabled that on the server, they'll never get data from it. So you can shut them off pretty quick, which is kind of why we started looking at this. Like Bezlio is actually good for like BYOD environments because if somebody leaves, you just disable their connection and they can't get data anymore. Like they're just locked out of the system from then on.
We definitely recommend typically though, on SQL Server configuring it, like often just create a user called Bezlio or something like that. Maybe make read only to most tables unless you want to have some count tables like the login thing, whatever, like you want to write in there. Just be explicit with what you're opening up that way. It's just like that extra layer just in case.
Yeah, can you set up a user? This is like a little out of my territory.
Yep.
This is like set up like a user that has the breadth of an SA user that has access to multiple databases, but with like read-only information.
So DB data reader is the name of the library role that you assign it, and that means that you can read anything. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good thing that, like, we always like talking about security because, I think any software there's still room to grow in terms of security, but it's like, Bezlio is a really secure system. A lot of that came from our background. Like, when we did manufacturing consulting, we did a lot of consulting with, like, defense contractors and stuff like that that had very high security requirements. So we built the entire thing to be as absolutely secure as we could, too. Using best industry practices and industry standards too. It's like instead of rolling our own encryption mechanisms or anything like that, we just picked out AES-256, and it's like, yep. I think the current, like the last timing on it was it would take all of the computing power that exists right now, the entire history of mankind, to break half the keychain on it. So like until we really get into hardcore quantum computing, like AES-256 is going to be pretty secure. And even things like taking the encryptor token, because for a lot of people, a lot of other systems would use a password as the encryptor token, but that leaves a problem. If somebody's password 123, like you're stuck. You're not going to be able to, like you can't control the user. So by assigning those encryptor tokens, we can ensure a proper length to get a really solid encryption, short keys and stuff like that. can cause problems with encryption. So it's, you know, your encryption standard is only as good as your encryptors, so we try to make the encryptors very strong as well.
I use Beacons, which is hashing with salting.
Yeah.
How does that?
Very, I mean, similar concept. Yeah, yeah, very similar, you know, because bcrypt is the library that does the encryption, and then you specify the type of encryption usually that you're doing, and there's like so many different kinds that can get in there. But right now, AES is, I think it's the industry standard, is the strongest encryption. I think it's the same one they use on the iPhone, so it's pretty good.
Anything else?
I have one more question for you. You said you work on with the various defense contractors and stuff. Flying servers, flying nationals, working. Do you have anything with that?
In terms of, like,
Night effects, you know, installing BRDs, you know, in the networks.
yeah. You know, we have international customers that use it, and we actually had to get I think it was like an opinion from the State Department or something like that about our encryption technology. And so we have like these different classifications and things like that that go into it. So that's usually something we like to, you know, run by our legal team to make sure that everything's good there. We've not ran into any problems so far. We actually were able to cache consumption because it's going to and it's not generalized encryption. But yeah, if you're working with like, you know, inherent maybe suspect or something like that based on encryption standard rules, you know, there's power. So they can make sure that it's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what's the fun thing with using like high-end encryption. It's like, you know, they start ratcheting down a little bit on what's okay and what's not okay.
One thing, you know, there might be other ones where it's like, you know, there's no way